We had a lot of fun working with each other. And what was the fourth thing I was going to tell you about? I'll think of it. Anyway, it was a fun project, and here's what I titled it: The Saga of the Bench Project. Believe it or not, it was a 5-year ordeal. I've broken this down into 4 segments, talking about the incubation of the process, the build process, and I call it planting rather than installing the benches, the cast of supporters, and in the end, what makes me most proud of all is everybody smiles at sitting on the bench. They really like the benches. So let's get going. How did it all start? Well, it started back in 2018 when a fellow by the name of Tom McFarland, who doesn't live on the island, he lives in California, came to me at a concert we were having in the lower campground and said, it would really be nice if we had some benches on the North Bluff area so we can sit down and look at the marvelous view. And I was standing next to John Comstock, and he said, that's a good idea. So we talked to the board, and everybody said yes. So Tom and I went out there, we measured up the site, and Aaron didn't like our location, so we picked 2 other ones that were better. So we're happy about that. So that's how it started. But it grew from there. I've ridden my e-bike around Fort Flagler a lot, and there were 9 other benches that were failing. So I thought, okay, we'll add 9 more flat benches. Then Aaron said, gee, I'd like 9 more benches. Oh, okay. So that's 20 benches. Then we had the bluff collapse, so that was another bench we had to add. And then Mark got an email from someone saying, hey, this bench fell over. So we went out there, we picked it up, we cut the legs off, and I couldn't believe it. Everything above ground, and it's treated lumber, everything in ground was perfect. So we sealed the ends, and we replanted it. So we had some criterion for it. One of the criterion that you'll be surprised at is no wood preservative. State parks didn't want any preservative on there. They wanted them to gray out naturally, and with a really good wood that we've got, I think you'll do just fine. And also, no memorial benches. I will say we did shift the sign to 1 bench for the Brown family. So there's 1 memorial bench there, but that's the only one. So that was the criterion. Here you can see with an e-bike, and you can see one of those older benches was in deep, deep trouble. By the time we got there to replace it, he was laying on its side, and so were a couple other ones. There's a lot of designs we could have picked. Some of these designer benches, as I call them, they all have one thing in common. They're very complicated, they're very expensive, and nobody sits in them. I've got all kinds of pictures of these fancy benches. Nobody's sitting in them. They're looking at them, but they're not sitting in them. This bench is at the south side of the reserve with the land trust, facing south. It's cheap and dirty and sitting in the muck, and it's not going to last too long. But I really like this bench that's sitting directly in front of the museum. I thought, okay, this is a bench we can build, and we can make it live, but we're going to put some refinements to it. This other bench in front of the engineer's house in Fort Flagler is still standing. I'm surprised it's still standing, but it was fairly comfortable. So we thought, okay, we can do that with the arms. So if you're going to build a project, you got to have a prototype. So I built a prototype out of my scrap. So there's Tom McFarland sitting in the prototype. And you'll notice or feel that the arms are awful long. I guess I compressed this picture. But he wanted it long enough with his long arms so he could have his favorite beverage on the end of it. And we got that. So then we have what's known as the O34, which is a park approval process. And the only thing I'm going to say about that, it takes a lot of time. Try about 18 months. But we got through it. And then we had the build process. And that's when Bruce Carlson really got involved. And from that point forward, Bruce was my guy, and he was there for every step of the way. I can't thank him. the Alaska yellow cedar, Mark Secord kept bugging me. It's the only thing he bugged me about in this project. He said, you gotta go take a look at this Alaska yellow cedar. It's at the mill outlet in Tacoma. Okay. So we went down there and picked up a piece, 12 foot long, cut it in two. Bruce had half of it, I had the other half, and we played with it. Said, gee, this is pretty nice stuff. So we went down and got a whole load. Bruce had rented the U-Haul trailer right here, and it was full of wood, and what you're seeing there is not all of it. We have more. Thankfully, I didn't have any idea how we're going to do this, but Bruce said, well, I got a carport, I got a trailer, so we mounted on the trailer, put the little stickers in there so it would dry out, because it's green wood. I doubt if it was more than 30 days from in the brush, and it had not been planted. So fortunately enough, Bruce has got a really nice shop, and he's got this little D-wall planer. Every piece of wood that you might sit on out there in the park has been through that planer, not once, not 10 times, not 20, but close to 28 to 30 times. Now sometimes we can put multiple pieces in there, but fortunate enough that the wood is fairly soft, but you can only take off a little bit at a time to clean it up. So it was a real workhorse. But in the process, we generated a lot of sawdust. A lot of sawdust. Try about 12 bags plus. And this tool here I got from Joanne Comstock after John's passing. And the beauty of this little thing is it makes these little holes. So you can pass this around. That's called a Festool domino. The beauty of the domino, it's got a drill that when you push it in, it twists like a regular drill, but it goes side to side. So it cuts a slot like a domino. And you can get them various lengths. These, the ones we put in are about that length there, about 2 inches. And that's how we put the seats on and the backs on. And that's the reason you don't see any screw holes, because that was one of our criteria. No screw holes. And the reason for no screw holes is because every time you have a screw hole, that's where it's going to rot. Fortunately enough, Bruce has a really nice shop, and the 3 of us could work in there, and we got a lot done. Bruce is wearing a mask here because that stuff, the dust is a little toxic. So Andrea did research on that, and she said, you better wear a mask. So sometimes we wore a mask, and sometimes it was like we didn't. Sometimes we couldn't have a machine do it, so we up into the bench and drilled some of the holes by hand. There we have 7 kits. All of those pieces are the same length, same dimension, the holes are in the same place. One piece would fit any group you wanted. Clamps. Bruce has a lot of clamps. And Andrea for Christmas buys him more clamps because she's directed to. Seriously, had a lot of clamps, and by God, we used almost every one of them. So some of these flat benches, or trail benches as we call them, I took them home. It was C-clamps. I could do half of a bench at a time with tremendous pressure, and it worked pretty well. So Andrea was our tester. We had this first bench almost done, and she got up there on top of that high bench and tested it, and she approved it. So that was our design. So here's the 3 happy campers. Now Al Evkin has helped us with the assembly, and so did a fellow by the name of Bill Mossenfelder, and he lives down in Port Ludlow. But we were really happy getting that first bench done. I constantly joked with Bruce that it's only a bench. Bruce is very, very exacting, as we all know. And me, I'm not quite so much. So when Bruce would go a little bit too far off the edge of on accuracy, I would say, Bruce, it's only a bench. He said, oh yeah. So we'd go on. Planting process. Now I want you to take note of this picture because Bruce told me from the get-go, I'll help you build it, but I don't want to plant it. Bruce was there every time we planted it. Every time. And he was there for most of the hole drilling. But this particular tool here we got from Olympic Equipment Rentals, and we can't thank him enough because that was a real jewel. The augers, he's got a 9-inch auger and a 12-inch. Most of the holes are 9-inch. And at one time, no, I couldn't get any other help, so Paula came out there, my wife, and helped me. And this attachment here, the auger, because this machine can have a number of different attachments, it almost fell off. So that was close as we came to having an accident. But that was a real jewel. Okay, stuff. When we went out to the job site, we had a lot of stuff. We had concrete, we had water, we had a generator we got from the park, we had a cement mixer, and a lot of odds and ends. I think my checklist was about 33 items. And that bed in that trailer is 5 feet by 10. On the job site, you can see we had the little Honda generator set up, a concrete mixer, and generally we had 2 vehicles in there. Bruce designed this really slick framework to support the bench, so the bench was level, and we had the correct back angle, because that's one of the criteria. We wanted a back angle so people's butts stayed in the bench, the 3 that had backs and arms. So every time we either drilled the holes first, we came back a few days later, and that's how we did the process. And here, Mark that was our first bench, and we had just taken the frames away. We raked it up a little bit, and he's holding a Friends of Fort Flagler brochure. He's always selling something. Okay, here's the first trail bench we installed. You notice there we just used blocks because Bruce hadn't built the framework yet. And that was the first bench then. That's the one, Tony, you know that bench really well because it's the closest one to your house.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the ones that fell over. And here we are. That was actually the first bench that we built, but it was the 3rd bench with back and arms that we installed. And we also drilled 12-inch holes out here because we wanted more concrete in the ground for those heavier benches. A couple things on the when you look at these benches, and I'll be the first to admit, everything about this process was overkill. These 2 supports here, they'll probably support 1 or 2 of your cars if you could balance them on there. That's how strong they are for a vertical load. And you see here this little bit of cardboard around. It's called a sonotube. It's designed strictly for concrete work. And they only go down about 6 inches. And the idea there was we could raise or lower the level of the concrete, and we'd also keep a nice, tidy, clean top so we didn't have concrete spread everywhere. You'll also notice here that we have a brand on here. Almost all the benches have a brand except a couple of the early ones we planted. So that was the brand, and I can tell you this, and Bruce can tell you, it's hard to get that branding iron to do a good job. This is about the best I've ever seen. But it puts our name out there, and so people know who did it. That was a bench that Mark got the email on, hey, this bench fell over. And that's been there a long time. I cut the legs off, as I mentioned, and we put it back in the ground with a little bit of back angle tilt, like we wanted. So it's at the, if you come inside the park, take a right, go on that trail, that's the East Searchlight Trail, go all the way to the end, and you'll run right into this thing. The one we're probably most proud of, if you get on the Colville Trail, there's a bridge that goes off to the left, a fairly long bridge over a little swampy area. And originally there had been a bench right in this area here in the ground, about 15 to 20 years ago. And when I saw it initially, the logs for the base were just laying off in the brush. So I wanted to put another bench in there. But someone else suggested, gee, why don't we just extend the bridge deck, put a beam underneath it, and mount the bridge on there? Hey, that's a really good idea. So there we are mounting the bench. Those lag screws go down into the beam below, and it's a really nice, peaceful sit. I think you'll enjoy it if you haven't been there. Okay, our cast of supporters. I can't thank Mark Walters enough. He gave us such a screaming deal where are we here? Screaming deal on the rental of they call it dingo, but it's the auger machine. Carl's Building Supply gave us a good deal on the steel. This fella here is a professional woodworker, is retired in Port Townsend. He gave us some ideas, and that's where we got the back angle and the seat back angle, the support. Aaron gave us really good support from the park. And Mark, I can't thank you enough. You told us to use Alaska yellow cedar, please try and look at it, and we did, and I'm very pleased we did. Here's the interesting thing about the Alaska yellow cedar. We didn't get one splinter in our fingers in all the work we did, not one. Try that with any other kind of wood, you're gonna get splinters. And my neighbors, Amy and Wim, they let me use that large trailer anytime I wanted. I can't thank them enough. Okay, and the total crew of people that worked on the project, we had a total of 10 people. Who's it? Where's Bill in there? Bill Mossenfelder and Tom McFarlane live off island. Everyone else lives on the island. And some people that helped a lot, some people not so much. It was just kind of what I needed at the time, and so I can't thank everybody enough. It was good, really good. Everybody gave really good support. I've got to thank Andrea and my wife Paula, because we spent a lot of time in this project. I sucked up the bulk of Bruce's 2022 spare time. Yeah, a really good part of 23, but we got it done. And again, Bruce, a special thank you to you. I couldn't have had the quality that we did without you, so I thank you. And the Friends of Fort Flagler, for those of you that are members or contributors, thank you. And we also got a grant from the Washington State Parks Foundation. But what makes me happier than anything else is seeing the happy campers that are out there using the benches. People have a smile on their face, and that's, I feel really good about that. Here's Andrea, my wife Paula. That's on the first bench that we planted. And this is probably the very, very best picture of Bruce and Andrea and their 4 grandchildren. If you want to know how many people a bench like that can support, it supports 6 people, just one. And this is the last bench. We planted it in mid-September. Bruce and I went out a few days later, took the supports down, and then we came back in early October and trimmed some of the limbs off. That was the last bench, and that was basically 5 years start to finish. So a simple question for you. How many of you found the 21 benches that we planted, the new ones? And finding the one bench that we replanted? Again, we had a lot of fun, and one of the things I started to say is what gives me a lot of pleasure is, yeah, we're really proud of what we did, because they look really good. So thanks for your support.